Welcome to this lovely establishment that we only refer to as League Unlock. My name's Eric. Thanks for joining us. Time for a little bit of power rankings out of the LEC in Europe, and it was kind of more of the same here in Week 4. No huge surprises. You might consider Fnatic losing in historic fashion, the fastest game in European history. Maybe in the preseason, you would consider that to be a huge surprise, but when it's a 9th place team matching up against 1st place G2, it kind of went as expected, and G2's perfect run continues. They're almost at that halfway point where the 9-0 split, which is exactly where Wonder thought they would be. Right now, 8-0, no arguing against them being that top spot. They haven't lost a game. Anytime after 15 minutes, they've completely styled on people, and in a lot of games, pre-15 minutes, again, looking at you, Fnatic, they styled on them as well. They are looking like the best team in the West right now. Schalke, even though they dropped the game, they still remain in that top 2 spot, and the top 3 as a whole remain the same, even though Vitality and Schalke did both drop a game this week. I don't think it was enough to take them out of that top 3 spot, and Schalke, they had that convincing win against Misfits and a convincing loss at the hands of Origin, but that's just kind of the volatility that is best of ones. You're eventually going to drop some games to teams that you should be favored over and teams that you have looked better than, so not enough to knock them out of that top 3 spot. They still look like the best of the West here in Europe, but in that top 4, we do have someone new getting in there, and it's Splice. After their forgettable 0-2 week in Week 3, they bounced back in a heck of a way to go 2-0, and now at 5-3, they come into that top 4. And I feel like this is the ceiling we're going to see from this Splice squad. I don't know if they'll be able to break the top 3 ever this split. They're just playing a different style of game than pretty much everyone else that we've seen on this list. Back-to-back 45-minute games here in Week 4, and they did win both of them. We did see their late-game prowess that we've seen since 2018 with Kobbe. Even when he's not on hyper carries, even on something like that Lucian and the Jhin that he played this week, he's still able to carry and put out insane amounts of damage here in these late game team fights. And Splice is probably another team that when 9.3 hits and that's what they're playing, and he's able to build all these crit items, then you definitely know that Splice might actually be even better when Kobbe is able to play. They're actually able to draft comps around him where he can carry, but with so many of these other teams focusing on the early game, Splice, I don't know if they can just sail through the first 15 minutes of the game when you have someone like G2, even Schalke, who like to play aggressively in that early game, kind of dominating, and it's just too big a deficit for them to come back from. But that being said, they did do just that against Misfits. They fell behind early and were able to bounce back. Even Misfits got a Baron in that matchup. It looked like they were doing everything that they should have won that game. It looked like it was all going according to plan, but Splice turned around a couple of those fights. So kudos to them, because they proved that even at a deficit in the early game, they could bounce back and take over the early game. So Splice looking pretty good into the top 4 this week on the power rankings, and rounding out the top 5, another new team getting in there for, I believe they were there in Week 1. We saw them around the top 5. It's Origin. They had a fantastic bounce back week for them after an 0-2 week for them. They go 2-0 this week, and again, that win against Schalke was a staple and statement win for them to prove that they are a playoff contender. Their first match was against Rogue, which, as we know, pretty much everyone has been taking them down throughout the entirety of the Spring Split. But the second win against Schalke, they completely destroyed them. It was double-digit kills early. I think Schalke only had 2 kills at one point, and it was even upset on his comfortable Ezreal pick in that matchup that Schalke was not able to win on. So kudos to Origin. Expeke and Deficio and the gang are happy about that, to see them getting into that top 5. And Misfits at the lowest that we've seen. They went 0-2, and even going back to Week 3, it was some questionable performances from them. They only got their win against the 9th place team in Fnatic, which, I mean, who cares, right, when you're beating the 9th place team? So Misfits definitely on a downward trajectory, which is so surprising considering how good they looked in the first couple of weeks. SK Gaming up 1 spot to number 7, and I just want to highlight my man Selfmade in the jungle. Even though SK looks like they'll be hard-pressed to actually make playoffs, I think he has a legitimate shot and should probably win Rookie of the Split, because you've seen some of the numbers he's been putting up. He had something like 29% of his team's damage on a Xin Zhao game, which is absolutely insane. And he is far and away driving the train that is SK Gaming the entire early game. Anytime they have any kind of lead, it's from him popping off in that jungle. So big surprise for him. He's had a fantastic split, and just shout outs to him overall. Number 8, we have Excel, and similar to Golden Guardians and TSM, you're going to say, how are Excel ahead of Fnatic? They just beat them in the head-to-head. Overall, Excel actually played a good game against Vitality right after that loss to Fnatic, and if Vitality doesn't sneak a Baron, maybe Excel actually, is able to do something in that game, and they've got to win against Misfits. They've looked more competitive across this season than Fnatic have, so even though they lost that head-to-head in somewhat convincing fashion, they're still coming up a spot ahead of them, and heading into Week 5, it was announced that we're going to be seeing a new mid laner for them, special coming in for Exile. We've got some roster changes, and it's not just Excel. Also, Rogue going to be making some. We'll get to that in a sec. But Fnatic versus Excel in that matchup, I mean, there wasn't much going on. It was only 4 kills total. And I mean, it looked more like Fnatic of old. Broxa was active in the early game. He snowballed both of those solo lanes for him. Exile, I feel like this LeBlanc game is one of the main reasons he won't be in the starting lineup for the next weekend for Excel. But Fnatic looked decent in this game. I mean, but still overall, whenever they have a decent game, their 2 wins this split are now against Rogue and Excel, which are nothing to write home about, and both wins were followed up by absolutely soul-crushing defeats at Misfits, and now the most recent one being G2. So even with these 2 wins, Fnatic, you have not shown enough for me to really think that this is a playoff team still, which is still mind-boggling to me to even think that we'd be saying this late into the season. We're almost at the halfway point. It's not that 0-4 start anymore, 2-6, and it's not really looking that much better. We talked about Rogue, they're 0-8. They've got some roster changes that will be coming. Vander in for Wadid in the starting lineup, and Finn comes into the top lane for Profit, so 2 changes. 0-8, I guess you feel like something has to change going forward. And now, of course, all the rumors about Forgiven coming in. Larson likely going to be starting for Senkux when the summer split comes and he finishes up his school. So we may be seeing a very different Rogue roster when the summer split rolls around. But for right now, they're sitting at 0-8 and have been number 10 on our power rankings for, I believe, every single week so far. Hopefully, they can avoid the 0-18 curse, because no one wants to go down in the history books for that reason. We'll see if these roster changes can light a fire under the team and get them their first W here in Week 5 of the LEC.